Breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
On the subject of these school bubbles, Amy says, I don't want to send my child into a hub of COVID. There's no protection for children. COVID has been shown to be very dangerous. What are we doing to our children? Martin in Cheshire says, I'm sorry, but some of this is to the schools. Why do they send 150 home for one case? Others do nothing of the sort and send home only close contacts. Not surprising, some schools are dealing with this in a better way. All right, keep them coming. Now, as you've heard on the LBC News Bulletin, in part it's time to say farewell to furlough. As of today, it drops from 80 to 70%, and then I need to tell you as of the 1st of August, it will come down to 60% of your wages. Let's bring into the conversation Jivan Sandher, who's an economist at King's College London and was a former Treasury official, and joins me now. Do we have any sense, good morning to you, do we have any sense how many people are still in receipt of these payments?
Good morning, Nick. First of all, it's wonderful to be back. And it's around at the moment 1 to 2 million people we think are still on the furlough scheme in some form.
And as it's stepped down, explain what it is that the government's doing and how long do you think it will be in place, Jivan?
So at the moment, the businesses from today will have to contribute 10% of wages. That rises to 20% in the future. So the idea is that businesses will have to pay to keep people on furlough as time gets forward. And the problem is, of course, is that as businesses face the same restrictions as they did yesterday, they're also likely to start laying off staff as well.
People talk about zombie jobs, Jivan. Do you recognise that term? Do you think it's real?
I recognise the term, but I don't think it's real at this point in time. Look, the problem at the moment is people can't interact socially, right? There are social distancing restrictions in place and there's a virus and a pandemic still circulating. Those jobs are very much viable once we get over this pandemic, but especially when restrictions are relaxed. So it doesn't make any sense at all that from today, businesses have to pay to contribute to the furlough scheme, but yesterday they didn't. And once those costs start to rise, they're also going to start laying off workers as well.
Always good speaking with you. I've got to let you go because I've got the business secretary on the line, so please understand, Jivan. We'll talk at greater length next time. Jivan Sandher was a Treasury official and is now economist at King's College London. 8 before 8 is the time. Now, I know it's all done and dealt with, but you have to recall that when Brexit was being discussed, one of the threats was that the industry would collapse and no one would ever invest here. So we have to say that really heralds the good news concerning Nissan unveiling plans to build a huge battery factory. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to let the Business Secretary and, of course, Conservative MP Kwasi Kwarteng give you more detail on the good news, who joins me from the Nissan factory, I understand, in Sunderland. OK, Secretary of State, spill out the good news in detail. Good morning.
Hello, Nick. As you said, it's great news. Nissan have come in with £1 billion of new investment. They are partnering with a company called Envision, which makes batteries for electric vehicles in factories which we call gigafactories. They're these huge factories. This is the first gigafactory in the UK. It's going to provide 1,600 new jobs, well-paid jobs here in the northeast, and it's a great news story for Britain, as you said.
We celebrate that. While I have the benefit of you on the line, we have talked before about locking in the so-called terminus date. Can you tell us now definitively that we will hit those targets by the necessary date?
I have done that before, and we had to delay the time, to be honest, be very frank. But I think 19th of July is something which the Prime Minister has been committed to. I was very pleased to see the new Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, also mention that date. And I am fully committed to reopening fully on that date, the 19th of July.
What will you particularly be watching? What indicators, what measures, what figures are you watching for?
The usual figures. We look at hospitalisation rates because obviously the NHS has to take the strain of that. And we're also looking at infection rates to see how quickly the virus is spreading. But as you know, the 2 vaccinations that we've had, the double doses, people who've had double doses, are very much protected against the virus, and the information that we're seeing is very encouraging.
OK. I spoke with one of your colleagues yesterday and reflected the anger that many of my listeners feel about the measure that's being brought in that business people, if they come from larger companies, can avoid some part of quarantine if they're coming in to do a deal in the UK. This, as I said to your colleague, at the same time as people can't attend funerals, can't sing at weddings, and in some instances are losing employment because they're at home looking after their children. How can you justify that, Secretary of State?
I think these are always very difficult questions. I mean, we talked about Nissan, and I was very keen that there would be a few exceptions, but I always argued that the exceptions had to be very, very limited. And in the case when people are coming in with £1 billion of investment and having 500 new jobs, 1,000 jobs.
So yours is the party for the rich, isn't it?
It isn't the party. It's a party of investment.
Mr. Kwarteng, it's the party. If you've got a $1 billion deal on the table, we'll find you a hurdle through exam. If you want to go to Granny's funeral, there's nothing we can do. That's the Conservative government, isn't it, Mr. Kwarteng?
No. So the difficulty with that, Nick, is that all around the world, people are competing for investment. I was reading stories 2 weeks ago about President Macron inviting huge numbers of people to Paris to invest in the French economy. And you're not telling me as business secretary that I should sit idly by while President Macron attracts huge amounts of investment and creates jobs in France. It's a competitive system, global system that we have, and Britain has to compete to attract investment.
Tell a constituent in Spelthorne why he or she can't attend a funeral today.
I would say that they can if they have in a socially distanced
restricted
way.
Numbers, though.
They are restricted.
Or why they're at home looking after their child because they're still in these ridiculous bubbles. But a businessman or a businesswoman can come in and will find a way, will hurdle them over quarantine. It's unacceptable. It's the ugly face of the Conservative Party at this time, Mr. Kwarteng.
It isn't the ugly face of the Conservative Party. What it is trying to attract. I mean, you don't seem to take any account of jobs or any account of wealth creation or any account of the fact.
Respectfully,
that
I don't think you're taking any account of people who are in mourning, people who want to go to their daughters' or sons' weddings, people who want to do a job and they can't, Secretary of State, because they're having to stay home because their children have been forced to self-isolate. And they're only paid when they turn up for work. You want to talk work? I'll talk work about that, Mr. Kwarteng.
Nick, I accept it's a really, really difficult set of choices we have to make. But as a business secretary, I have to think about thousands of people who need employment, and the prosperity of this country depends on inward investment, as it always has done.
There was an exchange between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition yesterday concerning a gentleman called Ollie Bibby, who died of leukemia in hospital on May the 5th, the day before the former Health Secretary, your former colleague, or still colleague actually, was filmed kissing a female aide. Mr. Johnson says it's a Westminster bubble story or issue. Is he right?
I think what Matt Hancock did was wrong. I think he paid the price for acting the way he did. But Matt was someone who worked extremely hard over the course of the pandemic. And I don't want to detract from the effort that he put in. And he was a colleague that I admired.
Indeed. Respectfully, my question focuses more on the poor individual who died of leukemia, which, in the Prime Minister's view, this is a Westminster bubble story. For the second time, Mr. Kwarteng, is he right?
I've said what I've said about Matt. I've said what I've said about his resignation.
Yes, but Mr. Johnson's view that this is a Westminster bubble story.
I think it was a story which a lot of people in the Westminster bubble, journalists, politicians, were fascinated by. Lots of people in the country were fascinated by what happened to Matt. And there's been endless debate about it.
Lastly, you have quite rightly explained how hard you and your colleagues are working to protect the borders. But my understanding is that as we progress through the Euros, around 2,500 delegates, sponsors, officials and others from whatever countries are still in the semis are allowed to get in. If you're so keen on protecting the borders, why are you permitting that, Secretary of State?
Again, it's a balanced question. I mean, what do we do? Do we scrap the tournament or do we allow it to take place? We've allowed it to take place, and UEFA have made a case for people coming in. And as long as we have our own protection, so the main focus on that we've always had, Nick, as you know, has been on vaccinations and doses to protect our people. And as long as we keep doing that, I think we'll have a measure of protection that we can live with.
You're wholly comfortable that possibly, and I'm sure you, like I, are pulling for England to win the damn thing, not just get to the semis, but possibly 10,000 people will come from different countries in the space of a few days, and all the checks that you and your colleagues, you're completely relaxed about that, and it's necessary, Mr. Kwarteng.
I'm not completely relaxed. There's always none of these decisions are easy, but I think that as long as we drive up the vaccination numbers, and as long as we observe our social distancing rules, I think we do have a measure of protection. I think there is a balance there.
And lastly, why can't an English or even British delegation go to Rome this Saturday?
I have no idea what the Roman sports arrangements are. I think it's something for the Italian government. Obviously, I would if I was Foreign Secretary or the sports minister, I'd be very, very concerned. And I'd want to talk to the Italian officials about allowing British delegates to come into Italy.
Grateful for your time. Congratulations to you and your colleagues with the Nissan deal. It's fantastic news. We'll finish on that positive. Kwasi Kwarteng, your business secretary, appearing here on LBC, where it's 8 o'clock. The news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player. And
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Nissan has confirmed it will build a new electric